Hello and welcome to another video, and today I'm reviewing It Chapter 2, the movie. Just came out this weekend, had a humongous weekend. I think it made $91 million at the United States box office. It made $185 million globally. It's a tremendous success. Not as much of a weekend success as the previous one, but a massive success. I know a lot of you went out and you saw it. I know a lot of you are curious about my thoughts of it, being a huge fan of the original book. I had a very high expectation going into It Chapter 2 for this one to also meet those standards, and unfortunately it doesn't quite come close to what I wanted it to be. This review is not going to be 100% negative. I still had a good time with this movie. I still think it's a good companion. Obviously, it's the second half of a bigger project here in terms of a movie, but one of my biggest complaints just right out of the gate, and I gave it a pass until I saw the actual movie, because I kind of saw this coming out pre-release that a lot of the critics were complaining about the length of the movie. Unfortunately, I have to side with them on this one. The movie's too long. You know, it's almost 3 hours long. There's really not a need for it to be that long. I feel like some tighter editing, there's a couple things you could have edited completely out of this movie, and I think with a tighter editing schedule, you could have got it down to the same length as the original movie from 2017, which was around 2 hours and 15 minutes. Much more plausible for a horror movie. A 3-hour horror movie, it's just too much. Putting the length aside, one of my biggest complaints about this movie specifically is I just going through it and thinking back upon it, it just doesn't stack up to what I was expecting. You know, one of the biggest things they do in this movie, and compared to the previous one, is there's a lot less of Pennywise in actuality and a lot more of him morphing into the adult versions of these kids' different fears. One of the biggest plot points of this movie is the Ritual of Chud, which is in the original novel, and they each have to kind of get their own artifact from their past to do this, and so there's a scene with each one of these kids as an adult now getting this artifact. And a lot of times Pennywise manifests as a product of their real fear rather than himself. And well, yes, that's a thing that happened in the book, it's a thing that happened in the original movie, you know, whatever. I would have liked a few more scenes with Pennywise in the movie himself. There's a really fantastic scene in this movie with Pennywise and a little girl who has kind of like a scar on her face, or maybe it's like a burn or something. She has something going on with her face, and he uses kind of reverse psychology with her to almost get her to be sympathetic towards him before he does what he does. And that was a really impactful scene, and also an incredibly creepy scene in a movie that I felt didn't have enough creep factor, or it wasn't scary. Not that I felt like the previous one was scary either, but this one just didn't bring it in that regard. That being said, I think all the adult actors do a really good job in this movie. You have Jessica Chastain, you have James McAvoy, and you have Bill Hader, who really steals the show in this movie as Richie. I liked all of their performances. I think they all did a fantastic job playing the adult versions of these characters. There's also a lot of throwbacks to the children actors, and you get more scenes with them because they kind of do a flashback thing throughout this movie. That's really exciting and cool too. But just one of the biggest things, and I have to delve into spoiler territory here on this movie, one of the biggest disappointments of this entire movie for me is how the dinner scene is handled. The original book and the movie, the dinner scene is terrifying. There's all this stuff going on. And here they've condensed it down to basically after the dinner, and it involves fortune cookies, but all of this is poor CG. It just looks fake, it looks out of place at times. It was almost laughable, and for the biggest thing that I went into this movie to see was that dinner scene, it was a massive letdown for me, and one of my biggest complaints about the movie as a whole. And I think that kind of sums up my feelings on It Chapter 2 is I liked it. You know, I walked out of it, I said, it's a movie I want to see again. Unfortunately, when I watched the movie, I watched a back-to-back showing of it at a local drive-in. And one of the biggest problems of watching a movie that has any nighttime scenes at a drive-in is it's harder to see the screen. it has a lot of those scenes, so it was difficult to see a lot of stuff in this movie. So I'd like to see the movie when it comes out on 4K again and really get the experience there, but I enjoyed it for what it was. You know, I walked out of it, I wasn't like massively disappointed, but I was let down. You know, this is a movie that built hype up for 2 years, and then for it to finally come out and just kind of walk out of it and go, yeah, it was okay. You know, is kind of disappointing, considering I walked out of the first one, I was like, that was fantastic. I can't wait for the sequel, and here's the sequel 2 years later, and it's just okay. One other thing I will say in this review, my favorite scene of the entire movie, and this also kind of sums up my feelings on this movie, Stephen King has a fantastic cameo in this movie, and it's really well done. It's probably my favorite cameo he's done of any of his book adaptations to film. It's a fantastic cameo. It really gave him more of a scene than most of his cameos do, and I really enjoyed it. And I think it's very telling for me to come out of this movie and say my favorite scene was the Stephen King cameo. But it's really true. Like, the rest of the movie, like, there's a lot going on. It's too long. There's a whole subplot from the book with the bully kid whose name escapes me right now. I think it's Henry Bowers. You know, that whole plot in the book, he was kind of almost like Pennywise's right-hand man, and they don't explain that here in the movie, but they do stuff with it. They kind of did some stuff with it in the original 2017 first part of this, and in here it's not explained, so your casual audience who never read the book, they're not going to know what's going on with that. They don't do enough with that. I think if you would have cut those scenes out completely, you would have trimmed down your time, it would have been a lot better. So, unfortunately, It Chapter 2, you know, I don't have a lot more to say about it. I definitely think it's worth your time, especially if you saw the original. I mean, go see the sequel. Don't be an idiot. But, you know, I walked out of it disappointed, and I think that's the biggest complaint I have, is I went in with it with massive expectations after how phenomenal that first movie was, and this was merely just okay in comparison. So, It Chapter 2, it seems a little harsh. You know, unfortunately, because of my complaints about it, I'm giving it a B-. I really toyed with giving it a C+, but I think a B- is perfectly fair for what this movie offers. Again, if you've seen the first part, don't be an idiot. Go see the second part. Maybe you'll have a different opinion than I did, but I don't have this immediate urge to watch it again like I did the previous movie, and that's very telling. So, anyways, guys, I hope you liked this short, quick review of It Chapter 2. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And as always, until next time.